So those of you who may not know, I stand before you as a very proud Native man who hails from ancestors of hunters, woodsmen, meat eaters, people who knew how to track, find game, be aware of the enemy. So you can imagine how much shame I have in saying to you and confessing that once in what I wish was more of a distant past, I got lost at Regional Park. This is not a proud moment for a Native man. It was worse because my wife was out of town and I was taking the kids out on their first adventure with Dad in a long time. And honestly, now, I don't remember if all three of them were there. I'm thinking maybe just the younger two. She was probably out of town with my oldest one. And so I took them to Regional Park for an adventure, and we played, and we frolicked, and we walked in the creek, and we threw rocks, and we found sticks, and all the kinds of things that you do to have a great, memorable Dad Day. And my wife said, I know it's just Regional Park, but you probably should stick to the trails. This is a Native man you're talking to. I can track myself out of anything. So we didn't stay on the trails. And then I realized that somewhere in there when they started saying, I'm really hungry, getting tired of walking, can you carry me? And I look around, I'm like, I'm not really sure where we've meandered. But I kept my cool, and we kept walking. I didn't let them know there was danger until I could tell the shadows in the woods were extending. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have my kids out here, and it's about to get dark in the woods. And what's worse is I'm a Native man that should be a tracker. The worst thing wasn't that I had my kids, it was my reputation as a skillful Native man. And I watched, and I remember those shadows extending, which meant that sun was dropping fast. The girls were getting cold, and I was so relieved when we finally stepped on the edge, and I could see the sun, and even though we had parked way up by the skate park, I was beholding the interstate. But at least I knew that where the interstate was, I could circle back around. But there was that moment when I thought, I don't know if I'm going to make it out of here before the sun sets, and then we're really going to be in trouble. Well, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like that, but that's exactly the scenario that Jesus is describing here in this passage. Because I remember having this decision where I felt panicked, and we had to make a decision. Are we going to stop and be scared and let the darkness hide us from getting out of here? Or are we going to keep pressing on? And this is the picture that Jesus is painting here at the very end of John chapter 12. My friends, it's evening in his ministry, and the light of his presence is almost gone from the world in terms of the experience of the people walking with him that were contemporary with Jesus. This is about to go away. The light of his presence is almost gone. And people have seen miracles, and they've heard his teaching, and they've felt the power of his compassion. And yet, many of them still turn away and don't believe. And this is what breaks Jesus' heart. Now, this is really important. It is not because Jesus has a weak ego and can't handle the rejection. He knows that the option of rejecting him is going to be destruction. Remember, he is speaking to his contemporaries. There have been prophecies about the ending of the old covenant and the coming in of the new covenant. Jesus knows the time is upon them. If they stubbornly commit to the old covenant, when it gets destroyed, they will die along with it. And the burden of Jesus' heart is to speak to them and save them from that fate by yielding to their God's Messiah and embracing this way of the new covenant, which, as we see in the New Testament writings, that was very difficult for them to understand. But Jesus was very clear with them, what's going to happen if you don't is this city will go under siege and it will be destroyed, and all those who run to it for safety will also be destroyed. And we know historically historically, this in fact happened with the bloody massacre of 70 AD when the Romans encamped around and forced the Jewish people who went inside the city to be in. I mean, the stories of that time, cannibalism that took place, it was horrendous suffering. Well, Jesus is here before all of this. He is warning them of coming destruction. And when they refuse, it breaks his heart, not because he feels rejected, but because he loves them and he wants them to be empowered to be free of the consequence of choosing to reject him. And so Jesus is moved. And what Jesus says in light of this heartbreak, walk while you have the light before darkness overtakes you. Believe in the light so that you may become children of the light. And that's the bottom line for them in their story, but it has implications for us in our story, especially as we see what it reveals about the heart of God and his posture toward those who are antagonistic and reject him. Even in the face of rejection, Jesus offers light. There is still time for his opponents to believe, and there's still time for them to walk in the light. And this is the message he's bringing here in this late hour. So we look at John chapter 12, and we're going to look at verses 37 through 50. Even after Jesus had performed so many signs in their presence, they still would not believe him. This was to fulfill the word of Isaiah the prophet. Lord, who has believed our message, and to whom has the arm of the Lord been revealed? For this reason, they could not believe, because as Isaiah says elsewhere, he has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts, so they can neither see with their eyes, nor understand with their hearts, nor turn, and I would heal them. Isaiah is prophesying about this moment in Israel's history. Verse 41, Isaiah said this because he saw Jesus' glory and spoke about him. Yet at the same time, many even among the leaders believed in him. But because of the Pharisees, they would not openly acknowledge their faith for fear they would be put out of the synagogue. For they loved human praise more than praise from God. Let me just pause and insert this, and want you all to remember, because when I read this, when we read this and talk about fear of man and so forth, we often read that as though we love the praise of the people of the world and it creates conflict of faith. But remember what it's specifically talking about. It's talking about living for the praise of your religious peers and friends. That's what they were living for. Not the secular praise that tore them away from our faith. And although this is more complicated, this is something that happens within the realm of faith. The problem was, even though they were surrounded by leaders of faith, they preferred their opinion over the praise and the call to obedience before God. So they loved human praise more than praise from God. Verse 44, then Jesus cried out, whoever believes in me does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. The one who looks at me is seeing the one who sent me. Let's read that verse one more time. And if you've got a blank coffee cup and a Sharpie, and you want to make your own Christian coffee mugs, it's amazing Christians can save things without souls. We do it all the time. We have Christian shirts, Christian coffee, Christian music, Christian this and that. Anyway, that's a side thing. But put this on your Christian coffee cup, okay? The one who looks at me is seeing the one who sent me. I have come into the world as a light, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. If anyone hears my words but does not keep them, I don't judge that person, for I do not come to judge the world, but to save the world. That's another pretty good one for your coffee mug, maybe on the back. There is a judge For the one who rejects me and does not accept my words, the very words I have spoken, will condemn them at the last day. For I did not speak my own, but the Father who sent me commanded me to say all that I have spoken. I know that his command leads to eternal life. So whatever I say is just what the Father has told me to say. So first, this opens up with the challenge and sometimes, oftentimes, heartbreak of unbelief. Because even after all the signs, blind eyes open, you have to remember, we're reading about this unbelief after this crowd saw Lazarus resurrected from the dead in 4 days. It's interesting. Anyone who says belief would have been so much harder if I just lived in the Bible times clearly has not read the Bible. I mean, because they are overwhelmed. I mean, you go all the way back to the children of Israel in the Exodus, down to the miracles, which are oftentimes a reenactment of the Exodus miracles, but that's for another time and another cup of coffee. They all react the same way. I mean, I know that we're reading things. If we saw a resurrection, it'd probably be easy to believe. Nope. Human nature is still the same, and it doesn't matter what objective evidence is in the eyes or the head. Until the heart is moved, belief is nearly impossible if we're committed to unbelief. And so this is where they find themselves. And so after all of this, and then John quotes Isaiah, and he actually applies it to that generation of Jews during the time of Jesus. He has blinded their eyes and hardened their hearts. Now, this is really important, and this is Baptism Sunday, and you all already tricked me by bringing up questions. I just feel the energy of the questions in my head, and then I get distracted, so I can't go too far. I mean, the Sunday school class was near disaster today. I just could not. We started sharing, talking back and forth. I just had no control over the lesson. So I would be happy to sit with anyone over coffee, lunch. If you come here, the coffee's free. And talk about, what is this? This God, he hardens hearts and then he judges people. This is a complex theological concept that we don't have to break down in here. So I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version of my understanding, not expecting you just to take it because I'm the preacher. I am happy for us to take a moment to talk about, but suffice it to say this. In the Old Testament, under scrutiny, references to God's judgment are not a personal judgment. God got mad because you did bad. Now bad will be done to you by the hand of the God that you made mad, which is how we think of it. But if you go back and really look at context, it's clear that the writers are saying judgment of God as a way of referencing metaphorically the consequences of sin and foolishness and disobedience. Now, I can make that case stronger over coffee if you're interested in it, but if you're not, that's okay too, because there's lots of ways that people have understood this. But I do not think that I think that there's a strong case that the Bible uses synonymously God's judgment and the consequences of sin. And I bring that up whenever we read something like this particular passage in Isaiah, because it can be a little bit confusing when you're reading about this idea that God is the one that has hardened their hearts, but then he judges them. My friends, it's not that God delights in hard hearts. That's not the point. God is always luring us toward life, pulling us toward life, inviting us toward life. But when we resist love, our hearts grow hard. When we resist love, our hearts grow hard. And that's not just true of the divine. That is also true when someone tries to love us and we resist it. Our hearts get hardened. Resistance itself becomes the hardness of the heart. And every time we resist the light, it gets a little harder to see it. This is what trauma or even denial does, which is why it is so important that we don't shy away from complex theological issues. It is important that we learn how to articulate those in a way that are life-giving in the spirit of Christ rather than condemning in the spirit of the Satan or the adversary or the accuser. That's not what we want to put on people. So we want to contextualize and understand these realities. And this is what trauma or denial does. When we shut down to protect ourselves, we lose sensitivity. And the very thing that shields us from pain also dulls us from beauty. Which is why I am so passionate about a day where we live, where the church might consider a different posture toward those who don't share our faith. Hearts will never be transformed by antagonism. They are transformed by grace. I try to become a wiser man, but there are some things that just get on me. And this may be of the spirit or it may be of the flesh. But I am so vexed. Luckily, I'm not vexed anymore. I just deleted my Facebook app. But part of it was I was so vexed because there's a conversation going on in evangelicalism where we're calling culture war ministry and we're calling debate dialogue. My friends, these are not synonymous terms. Debate is not dialogue. They are not the same thing. Engaging in an ideological culture war is not doing missionary work for Jesus. These are not the same thing. They are two vastly different callings. I'm not condemning those called to that arena. I am saying it is a mistake, though, to conflate that as ministry so that antagonistic debate passes as dialogue, because that won't ever win anybody's hearts. It might win an ideological argument, but it won't transform the heart. I'm so sorry that you have an ADHD pastor. Those that will be baptized this morning, will you now make your way to the back in order to prepare for your baptisms? Thank you very much. There's no way, see, I've totally spaced it was baptism Sunday till that alarm went off. If you're never a virgin, live your life by alarms. Anyway, back to what we were talking about. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, yes. So this isn't, this antagonism, this debate, this is not dialogue. And it actually aggravates that hardness of heart. And Jesus wants to heal that. Because what we see here is some people who cannot trust the goodness of God even when they see evidence of it in miraculous intervention. And that is heartbreaking, but it is what pain does to us. Pain calls us to protect ourselves. That self-protection ends up not healing us, but robbing us of the full vision of beauty that God's inviting us into. When you close yourself off to that pain, here is the problem. God is real. He is not an idea. And too many of the times we get tripped into relating to him with our ideological selves rather than our authentic selves. But my friends, if your authentic self is full of doubt, resentment, and pain, that's where you need to find God. Because God is in the place that is real. He is not in the place where we perform to be what we think he wants. And the reason why we can't shut ourselves of pain is because that is where God is dwelling. So when you close yourself off to pain, you close yourself off to God's presence because he is in that pain with you. This is what's so important to understand the beauty of the incarnation, heaven and earth becoming one. It means that we don't live here in this world of pain and suffering, and our God is out there above it, untouched by it, and if we're lucky, we can pray in such a way, he'll help give us a little break in it. No, if we look for him, if we are in pain here and we're looking for God there, we'll never find him. Why? Because he is weeping with us. He is walking with us. He is experiencing the trial and the pain with us. And if you're going to find God, he's right here. He is never out there. He is always right here. Consider this thought. That's my new intro phrase. That means if you don't like it, you can't get mad at me. Consider this thought, brothers and sisters of Christ Community Church. What if, and I'm not saying this is so, but what if sin is not a crime to be punished, but a sickness to be healed? What if sin is not a crime to be punished, but it is a sickness to be healed? Which is why Jesus uses the metaphor of physician. Because if that's true, then what unbelief is, it's not about convincing someone ideologically. That means unbelief is simply the refusal of treatment. That's what unbelief is. It is not an ideological rejection of a body of ideas that could have saved you. It is refusing to run to the one that's offering to restore and heal you from the ravages and the disease of sin has caused in our lives. So unbelief is this resistance to that treatment. And then we go on to look at a different group of people, and these were not unbelievers, these were believers bound by fear. And we see those in 42 and 43. Some leaders believe, but they do it secretly, and they stay silent with that belief. They love, and the Bible's clear, what he's talking about here is not the wisdom of silence where you're slow to speak and quick to answer, because there is wisdom in that. This is the silence of fear, though. They love human praise more than praise from God. They need approval. The need for approval is one of the most powerful forms of bondage. In psychological circles, it's called social dependency, but in spirituality, it's simply called idolatry. Or, if you like it better, more romantic, the fear of man. We can't live for applause and walk in the light at the same time. Because when we measure our worth by how others see us, we then disconnect from our own inner revelation of light. And our nervous systems stay in constant threat mode, and we are always scanning for rejection. We get locked into that. But Jesus models the opposite. Inner alignment with the Father's voice. That's the other option. The applause of men, or an inner alignment with the Father's voice. And this is what Jesus models. The Father's voice, not the crowd's reaction. This is the only way to live in a rhythm of peace, because peace is the result when the soul agrees with God. My home group is going on a journey, and we're doing now a study where we have to journal every week. And it may or may not be for everyone. When I describe it now, I realize this, but I'm going to share it with you anyway because I already started the story. But what it is we are sitting with a list of reflections and questions and then a journal prompt. But the rules are write what immediately comes to your mind, because it just very well may be the Holy Spirit speaking to you. So we're doing this thing together, and we're going on this journey together. And I was prepping for Thursday night. I'm not the leader, I'm just a participant, but I was doing my homework. The question was, what is an identity you need to let go of? Now, when I've heard that before, I was like, oh, God doesn't call me, lazy and apathetic. He calls me the head and not the tail. I've been through these things before. That's what I thought. Do you know what came in my mind immediately when I asked the question, Lord, is there an identity I need to let go of? Immediately in my mind, the word, I could hear it, and I saw it spelled out in front of me. P-A-S-T-O-R. wrote it down. I thought, what? Do I need to resign? And then it was just very clear. It's no, but what you do in the kingdom is not who you are as my child. It's the way you serve. But the success or failure in how you serve has no bearing on who you are before me. And so that was a really powerful moment for me, which is why I would recommend, if you're not in a small group or a life group, sign up and get in one. Lots of powerful transformations of the Spirit are done with your brothers and sisters in the room. Anyway, that's my commercial there. But do you see that it's like we've got to let that go. We can't live for the externals. We can't live for the applause. We have to live in inner alignment with the Father's voice. And then the text says that John says that Jesus cried out. And what's going to happen in John is what we're about to read is his last public appeal. Whoever believes in me does not believe in me only, but in the one who sent me. I have come into the world as light so that no one who believes in me shall stay in darkness. Now notice that last sentence, so that no one who believes in me should stay in darkness. My friends, this is the heart of God. It is not condemnation. It is invitation. It's more of a jump on in. The water's fine. No matter how dark it's gotten, we are often just one step away from the light. We're just one prayer away. We're just one surrender away. We are just one utterance of the word, yes. Yes, Lord. And the light here that it's talking about, this is not just a metaphor. And again, we don't have a lot of time, but the early theologians had a lot to say about this word and this idea, because this word light isn't merely a metaphor. This word light is the uncreated light. It is God's own energy experienced as inner illumination and peace and heart transformation. So to walk in the light is to open up your entire being to the embrace of divine love. And that is the invitation. And then he brings it home. He says, I did not come to judge the world, but to save the world. And herein Jesus reframes the entire story. His light exposes truth, not to shame us, but rather to heal us. Judgment is not God's anger. It's the natural consequences of what happens when we walk away from the light. And it's God's heart to keep us from walking away from the light and to remain in it. Jesus doesn't shine the light on us to embarrass us. He shines it to liberate us and empower us to flourish in the shalom of the kingdom of God. Because when we walk in the light, two things happen. The lies lose their power and the truth becomes gentle enough to change us. And that's the only time it changes us, is when it's brought in that spirit of peace and gentleness, and you know the difference between a truth condemning you and the Holy Spirit speaking the same truth to set you free and to liberate you. And this is God's heart in that process. Truth without grace just feels like exposure. It just points things out, but leaves me in despair. But grace without truth feels like it's avoidance. And God doesn't want that. God's heart for me is not just to say God forgives me. He wants to liberate me from the self-destructive habit patterns that are harming me and the people around me that I love. Of course he would want that if he loves me. And so grace without truth feels like avoidance. Jesus brings exposure that heals, not one that humiliates. So to do this, we want to reorient ourselves toward the presence of that light. That light is already in you here this morning. That light is already active active. It has already taken up residence in you, and therefore is part of the key to understanding who you are and why you're here on earth. So we're going to skip down to the end because it's getting ready to be baptized time, which I do it Superman style. See? I'm ready to go. This is my Clark Kent uniform. Get in a phone booth and I'll become the baptizer. That's right. So, drop down to the end of your notes where it says the step into the light practice. And I implore you, practice this, okay? Take a moment and really walk these things out. You know how I like Trinitarian approaches. So the application has a morning, midday, and evening application. In the morning, open your eyes. This is your awareness exercise. I have the privilege with Landon Harvey, and I lead the junior high boys small group, and we love it. And one of the things that we're just doing with all that energy when we have our prayer circle before we go play football and try not to harm one another, is what we're doing this year is we're having those boys just share with us awareness practices. What can you do? So our awareness practice this week is we're all carrying a rock in our pocket. Just to remember, we can reach out in our pocket and say, you are here and you are our rock and I can trust you here. And so awareness practice becomes very important, not just for junior high boys, but for 53-year-old men, or 52. I don't remember how old I am. So when you wake up, sit on the edge of your bed. Yes, I'm saying begin here. Some of it in the mornings, things are more urgent for us. Do what you got to do. But quickly as you can, take a moment and slow down. Take in some slow breaths. I suggest 3. And each time you take a breath, exhale, just simply say, Christ, you are my light. Jesus, you are my light. Christ, you are my light. And we just remind ourselves. And then maybe you look up and you notice the first light of the morning. I don't always notice it from the beginning because sometimes I wake up between 3:30 and 4:30. Like this morning. I'm always better in the mornings because I try to do these things that we're going to talk about so I don't feel so hypocritical. Or it redeems my other hypocrisies at the very least. And this morning, I was waking at 3:40. Tried to go back to sleep, couldn't. So I went and met with God in the backyard, and I lit the chimenea at 4 o'clock and just sat before the flame. And it was interesting as I prayed for this morning and as I thought about this, then somewhere after 6:20, just light just started breaking in everywhere, all around me. Even when you couldn't see the source of the light, it just starts breaking in and altering the atmosphere. And I was reminded in such a beautiful, dramatic way, Christ, you are my light. And as you see that light, let it become your prayer of gratitude. Midday, walk outside. This is an embodied practice. Just for 5 minutes, step outdoors for a second. Let the sunlight touch your skin and your face, and then simply take a deep breath and say, I walk in your light and I trust your pace. I walk in the light and I trust your pace. If you keep saying this, it really will cause your mind and your thoughts, and for me even, I felt like my heart wasn't just aligned this morning. My entire central nervous system was aligned with the Father's voice this morning. And it's a beautiful place to be in, my friends. So you take that moment. You retrain your nervous system. You pray with your body because you're up and you're moving around and you're acknowledging that you are a fearfully and wonderfully made creature that is not bifurcated between spirit and flesh. You are all one, and all of it belongs before the presence of God. And then in the evening, I know this is a little risky because it may be weird to some of you, but those of you with a liturgical background might feel affirmed. Light a candle or a chimenea, either one, but get before a flame this week and say, Jesus, you are the light that never fades. Just a few minutes, and then you can blow the candle out and go on about your business. But what I want you to do is to begin to practice praying with the body and the imagination, not just the mind and the words, because it opens it up to be a much more holistic practice, and it tends to be one that you return to when you create a ritual that's meaningful for you. This one's meaningful for me. May not be for you, but it's a good place to start, so just give me 7 days and see what you think. Jesus, you are the light that never fades. And then ask this question: where did I walk in your light today? And when did I turn away? This is not for condemnation. This is for simply improving the experience. Then sit in silence for 1 minute with gratitude. My friends, we got to stop talking about the light. We've got to practice it. And it's got to transform us before we are effective in shining it out in the darkness. So would you stand with me, and we're going to pray together. And then one of our elders, Mike Carnahan, is going to come up, and he's going to lead us in the communion time as we get ready to transition to the baptism. The worship team will be coming up here. This prayer that I'm about to pray, you'll find in your notes at the very end. So would you pray with me? Jesus, light of the world, you did not come to condemn, but to call us out of the shadows. Teach us to walk while we have the light. Open our eyes to your presence in the ordinary, in breath and sunlight and silence. And when we are afraid, steady us. When we are ashamed, remind us that your light heals, not harms. And as we practice your way this week, may your radiance grow in us until others see you through our lives. Amen.